Hi everyone, I'm Jo Mackay, Head of Local Fiction for HQ at HarperCollins Publishing. Welcome to our series of Herstory interviews with authors who write historical fiction primarily from the point of view of female characters, and by doing so, give back voices to women at a point in history where they may not have had them. Hence, her story, not history. I'm lucky today to be interviewing Karen Brooks. Karen is a journalist, academic, and author. Her compelling, deeply researched historical fiction includes The Brewer's Tale, The Locksmith's Daughter, The Chocolate Maker's Wife, and just released in March 2020, the outstanding The Darkest Shore. Karen, I know you have written about a 15th century female brewer, an Elizabethan spy and puzzle maker, and a 17th century apothecary skilled in the seductive art of chocolate making. In The Darkest Shore, your central character, the feisty and strong-minded Sorcha, I never pronounced this right, Sorcha McIntyre, is an early 18th century Scottish fishwife under scrutiny for witchcraft. What made you choose to write this character from this time period?
Sure, it's a great question, Jo. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Sorcha, what happens when I'm writing my books is I find that the period and the character come as a package deal. It's like I have no choice. And I first learned about the fishwives of Scotland in particular a while ago, and they fascinated me because exactly they're feisty, they were strong, they were formidable women in many ways and fiercely independent. And because I sort of always try to write about women in trade because it's something that we don't know much about in history. So I love uncovering all the little nuggets and gems that you can find out about women in trade. I like to go back to when the trade sort of was in its early stages. And so the period, as I say, came to me. Now, when I actually went to Scotland and toured the area that I'd be writing about, that's when I discovered the story about the terrible witch hunt in Pittenweem. And Sorcha McIntyre herself, after that, funnily enough, came to me fully fledged. She was a woman who, to the reader, or to the people of Pittenweem too, though she was born there, she's still what they call an incomer. And that means someone who's not, she's local, but she's not quite part of the village. So, you know, she has her own terrible secrets and tragedy. And through her eyes, we come to see the village and learn about the terrible witch hunt and its consequences. So, yeah, the period comes to me as a package deal, as I said.
I mean, you do choose to write characters who are quite distant from us in time. There must be particular challenges and opportunities when writing about these time periods that are so different from ours. What would you say they were?
Okay, that's another great question. I'll deal with them separately. I think the challenges are, for a start, as a modern woman writing about women in the past, where you know they were demeaned, disregarded in law, culture, society, socially, and it's very hard not to inflect the characters with contemporary values, particularly because you know I'm a feminist and brought up with feminism. So you have to be true to the period in that regard. And it's very challenging. It's very challenging to read about, let alone put the women through some really serious trials. You know, they all have a baptism by fire, but just even in everyday life and how they were, even in religion, regarded as infantile and childlike. So that's a real challenge because in writing historical fiction, you have to honour the period as hard as that can be. But I guess the opportunities are that you see how much things have changed in regards to gender and sexual equality. Sadly, you also see how much hasn't. And I think the thing I find I really struggle with is feminism's become such a dirty word in many people's minds these days, you know, the new F word, if you like. And I think when I read about these periods, and definitely when I write about them and create the female characters, I just think how sad all the sacrifices and all the things that they went through. And they did that for us so we can stand tall. And we are standing on the shoulders of giants. And men have benefited from it too. And yet, you know, we tend to push it aside or disregard or just take for granted the equality or the equity that we have now. We've still got a way to go, but you know, it's so much better than it was. So I think that's what I struggle with, but also find utterly fascinating too, and really, really come to appreciate the historical periods, the women and the men, because it's not just the women, you know, men of a certain class and things like that. And also the fact that people, men and women, could be complicit in their own oppression. That hasn't changed. And I find that really quite sad in many ways. What is it? I'm not very good at French, but I think the phrase is plus que change, which basically means the more things change, the more they stay the same. And that certainly rings true when you research history.
I think that's really, really interesting point, because I think you see that in the Darkest Shore, it's all about a community of women standing up against male sexual aggression and male power of all kinds, social, economic. And I think there's obviously resonances with that at present too. I think what's so amazing about your books is the depth of research that just works to bring those stories to life. And any of you have read Karen's books, you will know that they are immaculately researched, profoundly researched. How do you go about your research to give us such amazing world creation, Karen?
Well, thank you for that. It's nice that it's appreciated. It's a lot of work, but it's wonderful work, and I find it really difficult to pull myself out of it. I call it immersive research, in that I always start my books with a timeline, and it's a very intricate timeline of events, so I can include anything I find interesting and that really happened. And of course, because I have real characters from history in my books as well as fictional ones. And the only difference with The Darkest Shore was that it was based on a true story. But with the others, yeah, I work on a timeline. I read lots of academic articles, journal articles. I read lots of contemporary records. So from the actual periods that I'm writing, and whatever I can draw upon that's relevant, I do. So it might be something like court records or town minutes. And sometimes it's really difficult because it's in the medieval language or whatever, but always fascinating. I listen to the music of the period, read the poetry, look at the art. I also read great fiction by other authors set in the period, but that's later down the track once I've got my own story and voice firmly fixed in my head. So, yeah, and my husband often jokes that when he says goodbye to me when he's off to work, and he'll say, "Oh, so you're off to the 1400s today, or off to the 1700s?" and it is true, and I find it really hard to pull myself back into contemporary times. So, yeah, very immersive, and I love it, and I learn so much.
I think it really rings true in your books, in with your world creation, the scents and smells and all the detail that's in there really bring both worlds to life. So please don't stop ever doing that. Have you ever? I mean, research can be a rabbit hole for some writers. Have you ever kind of bent the story a little bit to fit a really great piece of research or a really fun story you've uncovered as you in the midst of it?
Oh yeah, not so I sacrifice plot to it though. I think that's the important thing too. Being a historical fiction writer, you've got to know history must serve the story, not dominate it. But having said that, I can give a couple of examples. One of them was in The Locksmith's Daughter. When I was reading a very old biography, it's in 3 volumes, of Sir Francis Walsingham, who of course was Elizabeth I's spy master and was one of my main characters. Yeah. And I discovered not only did he have some missing years in Italy where no one knows what happened to him, and he certainly didn't talk about it. So that was a gift. That was an absolute gift. But so, of course, I filled that gap. But the other thing that I found that I did include, and I did bend the plot a little bit, was he used to be a copious note taker. I mean, that's generally known. But what people don't know is that he kept, or generally don't know, is that he kept this massive big book with the most terrible title called The Book of Secret Intelligences. I mean, as an author, I would have made up a better name than that, you know. But that is actually what it was called. And he kept all the names of all his spies and what they were paid, often out of his own purse, and what they did. So when I found that out, and being an academic and a journalist too, I tried to find a second source to verify that. And then when I couldn't, I thought, oh, stuff it, you're a fiction writer, just include it anyway. So it makes a very important appearance in the novel. And and certainly with the Darkest Shore, with the fishwives, the superstitions of the fishing community were too good not to include, including the fact that the women used to hoist the men on their backs and walk them out through the shallows onto the boat so they'd stay dry. And that was just another little nugget, you know, that you just have to include. And with the book I'm currently writing, which is called The Mostly True Story of the Wife of Bath, I found out that Geoffrey Chaucer, the poet, and diplomat and so many other things, he's one of my main characters as well. Well, he also has some missing years. So it's like, you know, cue the villainous laugh, you know, moi. I can play with those and fill those to the benefit of the story, of hopefully of my story. Yeah.
Thanks, Karen, for those fascinating insights into the writing process. Karen's new book, she's just mentioned, will be out in the front half of 2021. But please do keep a lookout for The Darkest Shore, just released. If you would like to hear more from Karen or any other of the historical fiction authors that we have interviewed for Herstory, please head to harpercollins.com.au/Herstory. Karen's book is available to purchase from bookstores, including those that offer home delivery. And of course, you can buy the book from all good retailers. Thank you for joining us.